Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
How's it going, gentlemen? Welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scot McKay. You can find me at Scot McKay on most media outlets, social media outlets, that is, with the exception of Instagram, where I'm at Real Scot McKay. As you might well know already, YouTube has recently gone to handles, so I'm at Scot McKay even on YouTube nowadays. The website, as always, is mountaintoppodcast.com. Hope you'll pay it a visit, get on my newsletter, and get in on all the free goodies I have for you. And also, if you're not on the Facebook group, well, listen, first of all, if you're on Facebook at all, you should be in the Facebook group that is basically guys from this show. It's growing every day. It's a good, thriving group of men who are trying to get better with women and be better men in the process. That is, of course, the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. With me today is a new friend of mine. His name is John Mitchell. He isn't the John Mitchell that's associated with the Nixon administration. He is his own dog, and he's got arguably an even better, more interesting story than the John Mitchell from the 70s. He is from Think It, Be It up in Austin, Texas, which is just a brief drive up I-35 from here in Centone. And this guy has, first of all, 25x'd his income. And you may be thinking to yourself, all right, well, this cat was probably making minimum wage. Yeah, wait till you hear his story. And with that, he also, well, I don't know if you measure this, but he pretty much 25x'd his relationships with women also. I'm going to let you hear all of the salient points of these stories directly from him. But without anything further, here's John Mitchell from Think It, Be It. Welcome to the program, man.
Hey, Scott. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I just made a promise, and I'm going to have to be able to cash that check that my mouth just wrote. So we don't usually do a whole lot of backstory around here. Most of these guys really just want to hear something that's actionable and practical for them. But I think in your case, the backstory really matters because you went from, well, a certain place to a completely different place. So go ahead and tell us about it, man.
So when I turned 50, I just wasn't as successful as I thought I should be. And I started out as a CPA, became an entrepreneur when I was 30 in like 7 different businesses in my 30s and 40s. But, Scott, when I hit 50, just not as successful as I thought I should be. And I had 2 goals in my life: to make enough money so I didn't have to work and to find the woman of my dreams. And, on the money, I always made a couple $100,000 a year, but never close to $1 million a year. And on the girl at 50, I'd never been married. Although I got to say, I did a lot of interviewing. My friends called it begging, but I like to call it interviewing.
Now, when you're talking about interviewing, you're talking about interviewing women, not interviewing for a job, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Believe me, I was way past getting a job at that point. But interviewing women. And because at 50, I wanted to be married. I saw that was more important actually than making big money. But it was that combination of not being successful in finding a suitable partner in life, coupled with not making close to what I felt like I was capable of, that caused me to go, okay, how am I going to change this? And about 3 months after I turned 50, a pearl of wisdom came to me. Find the top book in the world on success and apply that book literally word for word to my life. And so, pretty good idea. And I do the research, and I discovered that there's one book that's been read by over 100 million people. And the next best-selling book on success has been read by less than 10 million people. And that book is Think and Grow Rich. So, Scott, I buy the book, read the book, and then I discover the problem. It says there's a secret for success, but the author only gives you half of the secret. So I'm bummed, and I mope around for like 3 weeks. And one day I just get up and go, come on, John, but just man up, figure out the full secret. And so I immersed myself in the book probably for, 2 to 3 months and read it probably 20 times. And I figured out the full secret and a 12-minute-a-day technique to apply it. And so I apply it to a new business I was starting in the reverse mortgage field. And quickly, my income starts doubling and doubling and doubling to where 4 years later, I was blessed to be making 25 times the 200 to 300,000 a year I'd been making. So I took my income to a little over 5 million a year, and I felt so blessed. And Scott, what was so cool is I could see why it was all happening. I was just playing the game of life at a higher level, and I could do things I couldn't do before. And really, the reason this 12-minute a day technique worked is because I had leveraged myself through science. And that's what caused the right actions to happen automatically. And the effect of that was that I was focused only on what moves the needle. I tripled my discipline, and I had a level of control over my life beyond what I'd ever experienced before. And what was interesting was not only was it impacting my income, but it was big time impacting my romantic relationship, which then led to finding my wife and marrying my wife. And as to credibility, once I had enough money to not have to work, I sold my company, and I ended up meeting the former chancellor of the University of Texas. And he said, "Hey, you got to teach this at Texas, and why don't we teach it together?" So that's what I do today, is to teach it to students in my class at the University of Texas, but also to typically entrepreneurs who are driven and want to play the game of life at a higher level.
All right, so all of the guys listening, including myself, heard that story and said, all right, well, screw Think and Grow Rich, screw Napoleon Hill and everything that was written like 100 years ago. I'm going into the reverse mortgage business because that's obviously where all the cash is.
Right.
Is that the cart and the horse in reverse, or are we on to something there?
No, you're not on to something.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a reason that I was in 7 different businesses before and couldn't break through. The difference was me. As is always the case, the issue is always you, not the external factors typically.
Really?
Yeah.
So if I decided to go into business selling 8-track tapes in the year 2022, where there's a will, there would be a way.
Well, let me put it this way. If other people are making $1 million net a year in a business, why can't you? That was all.
Okay.
That was always my philosophy, that, you just can't pick some random business that nobody's making any money and you're magically going to make it. But if you pick a legitimate business where other people are successfully netting 7 figures a year, why can't you?
Okay, now that's crystal clear. Here's another curveball I'm going to throw at you because, let's face it. You're talking a pretty big game here there, John Mitchell.
Sure.
And a lot of these guys are thinking to themselves, all right, I pick up the best-selling success book of all time, read it, cover to cover, and then I do something for 12 minutes a day and I 25x my income. I mean, what's next? Do I invest in FTX or something? This sounds like a get-rich-quick scheme. And I know it most likely isn't because you seem pretty proud of it and you're teaching it at University of Texas, and I have respect for that organization. So, John, I think you better tell us what you're doing for 12 minutes a day.
Well, I think it's astute for you to call me out on that because, it does sound too good to be true. But here's the problem. People go, well, I'm going to go read Think and Grow Rich. Well, that's not going to do you much good because it says there's a secret for success. And the essence is you got to figure out what the secret is. And let me share with you what the secret is, if I can. And
you absolutely can. Matter of fact, all of us, including myself this time around, will come at you with torches and pitchforks if you do not. So have at it, please.
I don't want that.
Yeah, no, neither do I really. I'm too lazy.
So
I need to rethink and grow rich and do something for 12 minutes a day so I'm not lazy anymore. That's
right,
yeah,
right.
Go ahead.
Well, and a little bit of the backstory. So when I turned 50, besides feeling sort of the scarcity of time, my mom was dying of pancreatic cancer in Dallas, and I was living in Dallas at the time. And Scott, every day after work, I'd go see her, and I'd go and hold her hand and love on her, and then I'd go out in the parking lot in the hospital and just cry my eyes out. And this goes on for probably 6 or 7 weeks. Every night, the same thing. And I'm crying my eyes out for like 30 minutes a night. And I've never experienced that emotional release every night. And obviously I'm feeling the loss of my mom. And, I didn't want to cry in front of her. That's why I'd go out in the parking lot. But I knew there was something a little deeper going on. And what I realized was that I felt like I was letting my mom down with my life, because my mom and dad gave me everything. They sent me to Jesuit high school in Dallas when they didn't have really the money to pay for it. They sent me to the University of Texas when I was 18 years old, and I didn't have to pay for anything. And, when I hit 50 and she's dying of pancreatic cancer, I'm like, all I've got to show for this life is I've got an average life. And I hated the average life because I just knew I was capable of so much more. And how it evolved to figuring out the full secret. I mean, I remember this like it was yesterday. It was during this time I'm going to see my mom every night after work. And I remember this one particular night, it was snowing. And it doesn't snow that often in Dallas. So as I'm driving home after seeing her at the hospital, I see the big snowflakes hit my windshield, and I get home and I sit down and I pick up Think and Grow Rich. And again, I'm trying to figure out what is the full secret. The part of the book this part of the secret it gives you is everything starts with a thought. Well, where do you go with that? So I knew there was something way more beyond that. And so I'm reading the book, and this particular night, I read that your success in life comes down to your daily actions. The cumulative effect of your daily actions determines your success in each area of your life. Well, I'm like, okay, never actually thought about it like that, but sure, I buy that. And then, Scott, I read that the majority of your daily actions are unconscious. In fact, 95% of your daily actions are unconscious. Well, I read that and I'm like, And so I start to get ready for bed. I'm tired and I put the book down, wash my face, brush my teeth, get in bed. But I can't stop thinking about that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious. And then it hits me. I'm like, wait a minute. If they're unconscious, then I don't control my daily actions, yet those daily actions are the very thing that determines my success in life. And I remember sitting up in bed, looking out at the snow falling in my backyard and going, wow, this is the most profound thing I've ever learned, that this is why I've always had this innate feeling that I'm playing the game of life at maybe 20% of my potential, and that the key to playing at my full potential is to control my unconscious daily actions. I mean, the logic is compelling. If your success is determined by your daily actions and 95% of your daily actions are unconscious, then of course you're playing the game of life at just a fraction of your potential. And so once I got that, then the full secret of Think and Grow Rich came to me. And here's what it is. What you envision in detail with emotion on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And I'll say that again. What you envision in detail with emotion on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And Scott, here's how you apply that. The first step is you create immense clarity about your life. You define, here's exactly the person I want to be. Here's exactly what I want to accomplish. And here's precisely how I'm going to achieve my clearly defined goals. So you create that clarity. That's step one. Then step two is I created a template to put that clarity on so that a couple of things could happen. First of all, so that the clarity was succinct enough that you could read it to yourself 12 minutes a day, but also it allowed to apply the science of the human mind to the process. And there's a lot of science behind how how to influence the subconscious mind. And so it includes NLP and a number of other scientific principles. And so by getting that clarity on the template, then the third step is possible. You start feeding that to yourself every day. And after approximately 21 days, your autopilot is rewired, the magic happens, and then the right actions start happening automatically without thinking. And that's the game changer.
Well, all of that still sounds sort of esoteric. I think we've all heard before, hey, just find your purpose and then get some motivation and do what you were born to do, and all the rest will follow magically. And I'm not sure that's really what you're trying to get across.
Right.
I'm intrigued by two different parts of your story. First of all, this idea that kind of rhymes, or at least goes along with the idea that we only use a certain part of our brains. We only use 15% of our brain or 20% of our brain. It's kind of like saying, 80% of all communication is nonverbal, or 90%. Right. The point is, there's a lot of our brain we don't use. And anybody who's ever gotten into lucid dreaming wakes up in a cold sweat the first time they've experienced that, going, holy crap, I really don't use most of my brain. Right. But you're taking this to a whole different level, kind of saying even when we're conscious in the daylight hours, we're really mostly unconscious. 95% of our time, we're sitting around basically waiting for Godot. We have an absurdist life going on where there's not any real meaning. We don't even control what's going on. Life is happening to us and around us rather than us taking a big conscious bite out of life. That's at least how I read what you're saying. Next, what you said sounds an awful lot like what I've been teaching for years, which is that there's sort of a continuum that leads to finding your groove and really being successful as a man. First of all, you find out what you're really passionate about. What do you believe in? What are you excited about? And then you let that motivate you, right, to go do something with that passion. And then that short-term passion, or that existential passion, if you will, the real-time feeling you have towards it, gets converted into a long-term ambition that you don't quit on, because it's something you feel deeply about and you go after. But then, as I mentioned on this show a few weeks ago, along comes the sponsor of this show, who's got a whole lot more notoriety than I do. That's Jocko Willink, and he's a Navy SEAL guy, a team leader from Iraq, and he thinks about everything in terms of tactics and strategy and military. And he basically swings the pendulum in the opposite direction, saying motivation's worthless. It's a bunch of cheap emotion. You got to have discipline. You got to just do what you don't want to do because it's got to be done whether you like it or not. And, I understand that sentiment. There are a lot of things I do with my passion in life, which I'm doing right now, which is helping guys get better with women and be better men, that I really don't feel like doing the grunt work, whatever that is from day to day. The details don't matter, to keep the business going, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, even my dad, who's retired and doesn't have to go to work in the morning, still has to clean the house, change the oil in his car, and mow the lawn. We all have to do things we don't want to do. Where's the secret sauce in what you're talking about that separates the mere interlopers into the world of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich from those who actually catch the meaning of it and actually make something of it?
Well, what I've laid out is the overview. Now let's get down to really how this works. It's interesting, Scott. I've appeared on a number of podcasts. I was just telling my wife this last night. A year ago, I would explain to people that the most profound thing I ever learned in my life was that 95% of my daily actions are unconscious. Well, I would say that on podcasts. The host would go, wow, that's interesting. And then off we go on to other topics. And when I have clients come to me, I say that to them, and I go, well, listen, we're not going to take another step forward until you really grasp that. And so the first thing we usually do is Google it. It'll confirm it on Google. But think about this in your romantic relationship, in your career, in your health. Literally, think about it. Your relationship with your girlfriend, let's say, is all reactive. You don't plan what you're going to say to her. It's all sort of in the moment. And the same in your business, the same in controlling your health and like what you're eating. And as an example, you'll appreciate this about the marriage. So because, I didn't actually get married until I was in my late 50s. And although I met my wife probably a year or two after I started doing this. And so I started programming myself in my 12-minute a day technique that I was going to be flexible, patient, and thoughtful. Well, okay, I start feeding that to myself every day. Well, 15 days in, I'm no more flexible, patient, or thoughtful than when I first started. But I kept on feeding it to myself. And then about the 21st, 22nd day, Ginger says something irritating. And Scott, in that moment, I was flexible, patient, and thoughtful because that's who I had become because I had programmed myself to be that way. And the reason it didn't work 15 days in is because the programming of my subconscious mind was not complete. So it rejected the programming. But it's amazing to me. So often I see with my clients and myself that after about 21 days, the magic happens and what you're feeding yourself starts showing up automatically without thinking.
Perhaps I'm being simplistic here, maybe overly so, but this all kind of sounds like the idea of habit change. If I'm intentional about changing a habit for, say, 15, 20 days, it will become unconscious competence at that point. And, I'm choosing my words wisely. Even though I'm invoking Malcolm Gladwell there, it has been true in my life that if there's something that I foresee as contributing to me being a better man, and I spend the next 15, 20 days really actively changing how I go about that, I'm going to feel like a phony at first. I wrote a piece years ago about why most self-help fails, and it's because people, especially in this culture, place a very high value on authenticity and just being yourself. And while you're changing those habits, you really feel like a fraud. You feel like you're trying to be something you're not. But what I try to instill in these guys, John, and what I'm thinking you'll probably agree with, is we shouldn't be stuck with who we are now. We should be evolving into the best version of ourselves, improving, doing better in the very real, practical way. And in order to do that, we not only have to envision the best version of ourselves, we have to do something that escapes our comfort familiarity zone right now to get to that point, right?
Well, this is so friggin' simple it hurts, really. But it starts, and challenge me on this.
Well, I'm living for the simple right now. Go for it.
Well, do you believe that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious?
Well, let me ask you this. I think what we need right now, myself included, along with the guys who are listening, are some objective examples of what unconscious habits and actions and the ways we're not really in control of our brain, what they really look like. And I hope that's not an oxymoron to ask, but just tell us what that looks like.
Let's do that. But here's what I want you and me to do. Let's get to the point where you either agree or disagree that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious, because I see that once somebody gets that, then everything I'm talking about makes sense. But I also get it that most people, because I was sort of this way at first too, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I don't know that I believe that it's 95%, but then I started looking at and again, we could take any of the areas of our life, but let's look at marriage. It's all reactive. You're not planning what you're going to say to your significant other. It's all reactive. And, here's another example. When I first got married, every once in a while, my wife would say something irritating, right? And, it was, I don't like what comes out of my mouth when she says something irritating. And so I'm like, okay, how am I going to fix this? And so I programmed myself in the 12-minute a day technique that I'm going to notice the irritation. I'm not going to respond to it. I'm just going to simply notice my irritation. And I program myself, if I just notice the irritation before anything comes out of my mouth, I found that, and I also feed to myself, if I just listen to her, maybe I'll actually learn something. And I saw that by programming myself to notice the irritation, that stopped what would ever come out of my mouth to actually listen to what she was saying. And I'm like, wow, that's a game changer in my relationship. And I'll give you another example. So every day I give my wife 2 compliments, first thing in the morning and at dinner. And again, I'm just programmed myself to where it happens automatically. Like in the mornings, we're laying in bed, ready to get up, and I'll just whisper to her. I might go, I can't believe I'm so lucky to be married to you. And, she'll coo and laugh. And, it starts our day off great. And then in the evening, I hold myself accountable to make sure at dinner, I find something that I can compliment her on. Well, if that's happening every single day, you can imagine the impact it has. Another example is if we ever have a fight, I learned this technique from Harville Hendricks in Dallas, a world-renowned psychotherapist, this idea of mirroring validation and empathy, where if you have a fight, an actual fight, you just slow down and you do this technique of mirroring validation and empathy. Well, I program myself to, if we ever have a fight, which is pretty rare, to do that. So again, the whole idea is it's all happening automatically without thinking. And that's the power just in a marriage relationship or a significant other relationship.
I have heard all sorts of relationship people say, all right, well, you know what? You have to get a hold of yourself. You have to realize how you're obstructing success in your marriage, in your daily life, and then just change the habit. And obviously, if you feel yourself getting irritated, then sense that irritation, and instead of reacting the way that you used to react, train yourself to have a new habit so that you go about it in a different way. The way you framed this, however, is confusing in that I'm feeling like if I program myself like a computer, I'm going to end up seeming robotic rather than spontaneous and, well, frankly, human.
Right.
So we're all going to have to decide on the fly what we're going to do about certain stimuli that hit us during the day. And we can't say, all right, no matter what happens, I've programmed myself so that if you pull this string, I'll say this or I'll do that. It sounds more like habit modification, learning empathy. And, one of my quasi-mentors, Mark Golston, teaches a lot of the same things. People have to learn how to feel felt, and once you empathize with people and instead of just getting angry and reacting emotionally, you really try to understand where they're coming from. I mean, if Napoleon Hill is the greatest book on success, I'm guessing that second place one that you mentioned before is probably Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is really, if you think about it, Dale Carnegie 2.0, which, again, one could argue is another book on success, but it's really about human dynamics. And, they all kind of say the same thing. Instead of trying to assert your point and be liked and make it all about you, why don't you relax a little, get to know where the other person's coming from. They'll like you better and you'll work better with them and they'll help propel your success more if you give before you try to get. I mean, even Jordan Peterson contemporarily nowadays is peddling sort of the same thing. His 12 rules for life, although all very profound, aren't exactly groundbreaking either. He's putting a different spin on them that makes them very salient and very entertaining to read. And yet one of them is consider that everybody else has something they can teach you no matter who they are. Boy, all the political people on Twitter could really let that one sink in. That's probably why they can't stand Jordan Peterson, right?
Right. Well, let me explain one thing that may clarify that.
Please go ahead.
So here's how the human mind works. The conscious mind sets your intention and is influenced by logic. The subconscious mind controls your daily actions, and it's only influenced by repetition. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to lose weight. Well, the intention to lose weight is made by the conscious mind based on the logic of the health benefits. Again, we're a conscious mind. But losing weight comes down to your daily actions, eating right and exercise. Well, that's all subconscious mind, and it's only influenced by repetition. So when you feed yourself that you're going to eat a certain way, I mean, this is how I do it, and you have to be specific. The subconscious mind doesn't respond to things that are general. But when you articulate to yourself, here's how I'm going to eat, here's how I'm going to exercise, after 21 days of that repetition, then the subconscious mind accepts the programming, and it all happens automatically without thinking. And it's not robotic. It's you're just programmed that way to be the way you desire to be. Again, this is so friggin' simple, it hurts.
All right, John, let me take a stab at perhaps being a little reductionist here, but indeed attempting to boil it down to one simple phrase.
Okay.
It's not that you're trying to take the 95% that's unconscious and turn it all into 100% conscious action. It's you're rewiring that 95% of unconscious habitual activity to work for you from now on instead of against you.
That's exactly right.
All right.
You couldn't have said it any better.
I hope not, because that makes sense to me.
But, I tell you, this is an interesting dialogue to me because, I see that now you get it because you and I had to go back and forth with each other for you to get it. And hopefully the members of the audience get it. But, you're right. You're reprogramming your autopilot. You're not going to change the fact that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious. That's not going to change. But what does change is how you react in the unconscious.
So I'm learning more about how my motor works and tuning up my motor for performance instead of lack thereof.
Right. And think about this, Scott. Think about this. So the number one book in the world on success by a factor of 10 is all about proactively influencing your subconscious mind, which I've never heard of any book talking about doing that. Well, that's exactly what Think and Grow Rich is about. And to me, that's the power of this. This isn't John's magic formula for being successful. This is the secret of Think and Grow Rich and the practical application to that book.
Well, I think the problem in modern day self-help is everybody's looking for a quip. They're looking for a soundbite. They're looking for a cute little slogan. And indeed, this makes people rich and famous and influential. Because that's what most people are looking for, something that sounds good. I mean, even politicians aren't exactly immune to this. Key example, T. Harv Eker. How you do anything is how you do everything. Well, I think at the core, if you were to dig in, T. Harv Eker and you are saying the same exact thing. However you're living your life right now, whatever you're doing, whatever you're up to, those habits have been formed and they've, well, let's use the word again because I like it, infiltrated every corner of your life. They've seeped in. So if you have water damage and you've got mold growing, well, you know what? You need to go in there and you need to do a cleanup operation. And I'm guessing because you have yet to really give us a true deep dive into what exactly you're doing for 12 minutes every morning, John. But I'm guessing it has something to do with you actively assessing what's going on in your unconscious and saying, okay, now that I've got the hood open into my unconscious, what am I going to actively try to rewire today? How am I doing with what I've been actively trying to rewire over the last several weeks? And if you don't have that kind of 12-minute devotional session with yourself every morning, well, then you may lose track of it and it may slip away because after all, we're talking about the unconscious here. Yes, right. No, maybe so?
Yes, you're on it. And here's the thing. There's a hard part to this. There's two parts to this. The first is creating that intention and clarity about your life. That's hard. Most people won't do that. This is really only for driven people, in my opinion, because only driven people where more success is a necessity rather than merely a preference. For most people, more success is merely a preference. Darren Hardy told me this. I showed this to Darren Hardy, and you know who Darren Hardy is?
I do not.
Well, he's arguably the top expert in the world on success. A lot of the audience will know who Darren Hardy is.
That explains an awful lot right there if I don't know who he is. I wonder if he knows who I am.
Of course he knows who you are. But
Thanks for playing along, John. I appreciate
it. But seriously, when I first started bringing this to the world, I thought, well, I'm going to go find the top expert in the world on success and show this to him. And he looks at it and he goes, wow, this is really good. But he says, John, people aren't going to spend 12 minutes a day on this. And I'm like, whoa, Darren, how the heck can that be? It 25x my income. We're applying the central concept of the top book in the world on success to people's lives. And Time Magazine did a cover story on the science behind my methodology. What do you mean they're not going to spend 12 minutes a day? He says, well, John, you're new to the success business. I'm just telling you, most people are not going to spend 12 minutes a day because only the people where more success is a necessity will do this. For the vast majority of people, more success is merely a preference. And that stuck with me. I didn't believe it at the time, but now I see it's immensely true because, and to get back to exactly how this works, this is why most people won't do it. You got to sit down and answer a series of questions in detail. And as an example, you divide your life into 5 areas: yourself, your health, your romantic relationship, your spirituality, and your career. And on the front, this is basically a 2-page document, or 1 page, front and back. And on the front is the ideal you in those 5 key areas of your life. Then on the back is the improvements you want in each area of your life, as well as your goal for the quarter, for your career, goal for your marriage or romantic relationship, and goal for your health. And you're defining, here's the goal, here's the why behind the goal, here's the key behaviors associated with the goal. And you'll also be measuring your key behaviors every Sunday.
So you're taking something that's subjective, i.e. your unconscious behaviors, and you're making them brutally objective. You're writing them down and itemizing them.
Right. And just simply by, here's an example. This is one of the things I found powerful. Like, I found in asking people, what are your top 3 values? A lot of times people cannot articulate succinctly what their top 3 values are. But once you step back from your life and you figure out what those top 3 values are, and you feed it to yourself every day, what happens is after about 21 days, you start to live those values in a way that you never had before because it happens automatically without thinking.
Well, I think the first thing a lot of people need to do is define values.
Yeah, right. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And here's another, if you're interested on the income side, how did 12 minutes a day 25x my income? Well, here's how it happened. I defined every day, and I'd feed these things to myself every day. I'd define, here's my succinct business plan. Here's my strategy for success. Here's the 2 or 3 things that move the needle in my business. Here's where I want to be in 3 years exactly. Here's the milestones to get there. And here's the linchpin issue to get there. Instead of having a business plan that sits on my shelf that draws dust, I'm feeding those 7 things to myself every day. And from the continual feeding of that, it caused me to understand myself and my business at a deeper and deeper level. And your template changes as you change. And believe me, you change. When you're going down this rabbit hole of clarity, you just have a deeper understanding of yourself, of your business, of your relationship, and it's just a game changer.
Explain to us how this is scientific, because it sounds very sociological.
Right. Well, it's scientific for a couple of reasons. I explained how the human mind works, and the essence of that is that because your daily actions are controlled by your subconscious mind, not your conscious mind, in light of the fact that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious, then you've got to influence that subconscious mind because that's the part that's controlling your actions. Well, that doesn't react to logic. The subconscious mind doesn't care about logic. It only cares about repetition. And as an example, in my career, I would define what moves the needle in my business. And when you're feeding that to yourself every day, believe me, you're laser focused only on what moves the needle. All distractions fall by the wayside. And the more you feed that to yourself every day, you'll start to see subtleties of what moves the needle. And when you see those subtleties, I would change my template. And that's why I say I would go deeper and deeper. And that's what caused my income to 25x is I just went from sort of shallowly doing my best every day to with immense intention and clarity, seeing how I was going to take my business to grossing 25 million and netting 5 million. I could see it in detail.
Well, I suppose social science is science also, and that's certainly that. Last question, because we do care immensely about our relationships with women, and as exciting as this conversation has been and the turns that we've taken, which have been many, one thing still comes to mind for me that I'm not quite hearing a resolution to in our conversation thus far with regard to intentionally taking back my subconscious and rewiring it relative to the relationships in my life, especially with women. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I'm thinking there, and I'm going to offer a solution in the interest of time and see if you're agreeing with me on it or if you have something to add to it.
Okay.
It takes two to tango to have a relationship, John. So regardless of how well I've tapped into everything you're talking about, if my wife or significant other doesn't give a rat's behind about it, aren't we still at square one? And my solution would be to bear in mind and perhaps reframe my unconscious behaviors to realize that as the masculine man in this relationship, the feminine responds to male leadership that's in the feminine's best interest. So as I lead, as I show a newfound respect for this relationship and being intentional about it and rewiring all my bad habits into new ones, if she's a good, reasonable woman, it's not like she's going to actively try to sabotage all that. She'll be along for the ride because we're partners.
Right. Well, I think you've hit at a critical thing. And here's what I observed when I was 50. I thought about all the relationships I'd had over the years. I don't know how many it was, but it was a lot of them. And one of the things I saw is that I rarely ever saw a relationship where we actually could resolve an issue. It always had to get swept under the rug. We actually couldn't resolve it. And, when I turned 50, I'm like, enough of having more of the same. So I was like, in my template, I would feed to myself, here's exactly the woman I'm looking for, and here's the man I got to be to attract her. And I saw that it was purely a numbers game, because when I got to be 50, I'm like, I joined 2 or 3 dating services, and I saw it was a volume game. And not that I was going to have relationships with a lot of them, but I was going to have one meeting. And if they didn't have the potential to be my wife, I was going on to the next one. I wasn't going to get hung up in 3 and 6 month relationships.
You were a relationship minded guy.
Right. Because I'd had all the fun, but I saw I didn't really experience love. I experienced a lot of other things that were fun, but not love. And I saw that finding that just takes one, because I wasn't sure I'd ever find her at 50, but I saw that I have way more control over my life than I thought I did. And with regards to finding the one, I would feed to myself every day, here's what I'm looking for. Here's who I've got to be. And what moves the needle is volume. Meet as many of them as possible. And I was meeting typically one girl a week. Well, and 9 out of 10 of them, I didn't want to have anything to do with. And it was a pain in the ass to spend an hour with 9 out of 10 of them. But then I'm like, this is just going to be fun. I'm just going to, even if I'm not attracted to them.
Yeah, try spending 2 years with the wrong one.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because you're not clear on the kind of things you've been talking about here for 45 minutes, right?
So I think, but to your point, you're right. I mean, it's a two-way street. And so often in my coaching clients, they tell me their relationship is a 5 or 6 and it's dead and they've been married for 20 years. And I'm like, oh my God, why would you put up with that? I mean, either divorce her or change And if you change, there's a decent chance she's going to change, but you're going to have to take the first step.
You know, to kind of punctuate everything you've just said, because I think you're right on the money, we shake our heads around here all the time at the sheer percentage of couples out there who don't even know why they're married to each other.
Right, right.
Talk about being unconscious. I mean, if we wake up our intentions, our desires, and actually become the kind of person who deserves what he wants. In other words, I know the kind of guy I am. I know what my values are. There's that word again. And I become the best version of that by reining in that 95% that I've, just been letting flap in the wind, for lack of a better way to put it, and being more intentional about building habits that serve me instead of defeating me. The next thing you know, I'm going to be this big four man of character who knows who he is and therefore knows who he's looking for. And the kind of women who are like me will be the ones who are most attracted to me too. At that point, you get a whole lot of clarity and it stops seeming like 3D chess and it brings it back down to the level for you. And then things start working. And a lot of guys just don't understand that, even though we spent a lot of time talking about it. And I'm really grateful, John, that you came here today and put a whole new spin on it and talked about it using completely different words. And what I want to do is I want to aim these guys on the straight and narrow and intentional level right towards your website by sending them to mountaintop.podcast.com/Mitchell, Mitchell. You were telling me that your book is actually forthcoming, and a lot of guys are going to be like, oh man, I would have loved to have read that book, but it sort of isn't there yet. It's a future.
Keep in mind, I've been, on my website, which is thinkitbeit.com.
Yeah, that's where I'm sending these guys. Yeah.
I explain all of this. It's easier than a book. And, partly why I've delayed in creating the book is I'm like, does the world need another book? Why not just explain the full secret of the top book of the world on success? That's what my website does.
Fantastic. It's not like you need our money either.
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. So mountaintoppodcast.com/Mitchell is where you can find out much more about everything we've talked about here today. Cause, John, you and I could talk about this for hours, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So go to John's website at mountaintoppodcast.com/Mitchell. It will transparently redirect to thinkitbeit.com. And I'm sure you will love everything you can immerse yourself in at that website when you visit it. John Mitchell from Austin, Texas, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you, man.
Scott, my pleasure.
And gentlemen, if you haven't visited our sponsors lately, Origin in Maine, Hero Soap, and Keyport, they're all there for you at convenient links at mountaintoppodcast.com. When you partake of any of their goodies, please use Mountain10 as a coupon code to get yourself 10% off. And gentlemen, you know what? Everything that John's been talking about for this podcast is so right on the money. If you are going out there in the world thinking, hey, you know what? The woman of my dreams is going to come to me when I least expect it, or my own private supermodel is going to come love me for exactly who I am, then guess what? You need to go rein in everything that's going on. Be intentional about it. Be the man you want to become. We've been talking about this sort of thing for years in different words. The man who knows who he is and knows who he wants becomes the best version of the guy who deserves what he wants, will have a much easier, more effective time attracting the kind of woman who's the right woman for him. And guess what? You're going to be the right man for that woman. That's how this is all supposed to work. Gentlemen, if you're fed up with having the same wrong relationship with a different woman time and time again, if you're serial dating, if you're going out with a woman and you know she's not right for you, and yet you're sticking around because, you'd have to start all over again if you went elsewhere, let's talk on the phone for 25 minutes about that and get you on the track, because you're listening to this podcast for a reason. If it has moved you, if it has excited you, John and I both want you to get the woman in your life just like he did, just like I did, and it all starts with a 25-minute phone call. mountaintoppodcast.com. And with that, until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.